My name is Eliza Moore. I'm 35 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the kind of woman people describe as reliable. Not inspiring, not impressive, just reliable. The kind you call when something needs fixing. The kind you lean on without ever checking if she's still standing. The night my younger sister got married inside my restaurant was the night I finally understood how invisibility works. Not the accidental kind. The practice kind. The kind that happens slowly, politely, over years, until one day you realize you've been erased without anyone ever raising their voice. I didn't expect a spotlight. I didn't expect a thank you speech. I didn't even expect acknowledgement loud enough to echo. Maybe just a look, a pause, something that said, I know this didn't appear out of nowhere. The restaurant had taken me 12 years to build. 12 years of early mornings and late nights, burnt fingers, missed birthdays, and leases signed with hands that were shaking but steady enough to commit. I'd opened it when I was 23, when everyone else was still figuring themselves out. I learned inventory systems before I learned how to rest. I learned profit margins before I learned how to say no. And now, on that Saturday evening, the space looked perfect. Too perfect. The brick walls glowed under warm amber lighting. The tables were dressed in linen so crisp they still smelled faintly of starch. White florals trailed down the staircase like they belonged there. The staff moved like a single organism, quiet, coordinated, flawless. Every detail had been approved by me. Every vendor had been booked through my accounts. Every late delivery had been absorbed by my margin. I had closed the restaurant for the entire weekend. Not because I could afford to lose the revenue, but because my sister asked. She didn't ask outright, not at first. She said things like, you know how meaningful it would be, and it's already yours, so it's not like it costs you anything. She said, it'll be intimate, which turned out to mean 80 guests. She said, we'll keep it simple, which somehow translated into custom cocktails and imported glassware. I told myself it was fine. I told myself it was family. I stood near the edge of the room as guests arrived, smiling at faces I recognized and many I didn't. They complimented the food, the ambience, the service. A few asked who owned the place. Before I could answer, someone else always did. Oh, her sister, they said. Or, someone in the family. The ceremony was held between the bar and the windowed wall. My sister walked down an aisle I'd measure myself. She wore a dress I'd helped steam that morning. She looked radiant, happy in a way that made people lean forward in their seats. When she reached the altar, she didn't look at me. Not once. During the welcome toast, her new husband thanked the guests. He thanked their parents. He thanked the bridal party. He thanked the staff. He gestured vaguely around the room. This place has been incredible, he said. We're so grateful. No name. No acknowledgement. Just gratitude without direction. Applause filled the room anyway. I lifted my glass when everyone else did. It felt automatic, like muscle memory. Like smiling for a photo you know you won't be tagged in. Dinner flowed seamlessly. The kitchen hit every mark. Plates returned clean. Laughter bounced off the walls. The band played softly in the background, exactly as I'd instructed. If something went wrong that night, no one knew about it. That was the point. After dessert, my sister clinked her glass and announced she wanted to open gifts. She said it with excitement, the kind that assumes an audience will stay quiet long enough to admire you. Envelopes were passed to her one by one. This one's from Claire and Ben, she said, pulling out a card and grinning. A weekend getaway. You know me so well. Applause. Oh, this is from Aunt Nora, she laughed. New cookware. Finally. More applause. I watched the pile shrink from my place near the back. I hadn't chosen a flashy envelope. No ribbon. No calligraphy. Just white cardstock, clean and unremarkable. Mine stayed at the bottom. I didn't think about that yet. Not consciously. I was too busy noticing how easily the night moved forward without me. Like the restaurant had decided it no longer needed its spine. When she finally picked up my envelope, the room was already restless. People shifting in their chairs. Someone coughing. Someone checking their phone. She glanced at the name. Her smile flickered. Not surprise, but recognition. Oh, she said. Just that. One syllable. Flat. Final. The room went quiet enough that I could hear the hum of the refrigeration units behind the bar. She hesitated, then opened it, And for the first time that night, she stopped performing. People like to believe moments like that come out of nowhere. That one night changes everything. But the truth is quieter than that. What happened at my sister's wedding didn't begin with the envelope. It began years earlier, so gradually that I didn't even recognize it as loss. Just adjustment. There was a time when my sister and I were close. Or at least I thought we were. She was 3 years younger than me. Louder, brighter, more comfortable asking for space in a room. I was the one who listened, who remembered, who filled in gaps without being asked. When she moved into her first apartment, I covered the security deposit because she was just short this month. When she switched careers and needed a new laptop, I put it on my card because mine had better rewards. When she forgot to renew her car insurance and panicked, I handled the call while she cried on my couch. None of it felt like sacrifice at the time. It felt like love. But love, when it only moves in one direction, has a way of disguising itself as duty. There was the dinner downtown, the one she organized after landing a promotion. She made a reservation for 6. Our parents, her boyfriend, 2 coworkers, me. I knew because she accidentally forwarded me the confirmation email meant for someone else. I replied with a simple question. Hey, just checking. Was this for 6 or 5? She didn't answer. That night I stayed home. I told myself she was busy. I liked her announcement post a week later and commented something supportive. She replied with a heart emoji. That was it. A year after that, she called me 2 days before her final presentation in grad school. Her printer had jammed. Her files wouldn't open. She was panicking. I drove across town at midnight with my laptop and external hard drive. We sat on her kitchen floor until 2 in the morning reconstructing her work. When she passed with distinction, she posted a photo holding her certificate. Caption: grateful for the support. No names. No tags. I told myself she didn't mean anything by it. There was the birthday dinner, the rooftop place she loved. When the check arrived, she slid it toward me casually and said, "Oh, I figured you'd just handle it and we'd Venmo later." Later never came. I paid anyway. It wasn't about the money, I told myself. It was about not making things awkward. About keeping the peace. I was very good at keeping the peace. What I wasn't good at was noticing how often my presence was treated like infrastructure. Necessary. Invisible. Expected. When my restaurant started gaining attention, she was proud of it, in theory. She bragged about it to friends. Posted photos from her favorite corner table. Called it our place when she introduced it to people. But she never said my name. When she got engaged, she came to me with a Pinterest board and a hopeful smile. "I was thinking," she said, "what if we did something small? Intimate. Somewhere meaningful." I knew what she meant before she finished the sentence. "You don't have to," I said carefully. She laughed. "Of course I don't. I'd never assume. It's just, wouldn't it be special?" Special is a dangerous word when you're used to earning love. We talk logistics, dates, guest count. She promised it would be simple. She promised she'd cover what she could. She promised we'd figure it out together. We didn't. As the months passed, every decision slid quietly into my hands. Vendors contacted me directly. Staff schedules defaulted to my approval. Expenses landed on my statements. Whenever I brought it up, she waved it away. "We'll settle it later," she said. "Don't stress. You know I appreciate you." Appreciation without acknowledgement has a way of hollowing you out. By the time the wedding weekend arrived, I was exhausted in a way sleep couldn't touch. Not physically, emotionally. I'd rehearsed my role so well that I barely noticed how small it had become. Host, organizer, silent partner, not sister. The morning of the wedding, I watched my sister get ready in the private dining room. She was glowing, nervous, happy. I adjusted her veil and handed her a glass of water. She squeezed my hand briefly. "Thank you for everything," she said, already turning away. I don't think she realized how final it sounded. Standing there, I felt something shift. Not sharply, not dramatically. Just a subtle click into place. Like a drawer closing. For the first time, I asked myself a question I'd avoided for years. If I stopped giving, would anything remain? That question stayed with me as the guests arrived. As the ceremony unfolded. As applause filled the room without ever finding me. And when my sister reached the bottom of the gift stack that night, when she picked up my envelope last, I already knew something she didn't. This wasn't about generosity anymore. It was about recognition, and I was done supplying it for free. The longer the night went on, the more my role faded into the background. I noticed it in small ways at first. How people stopped asking me questions and started assuming I'd already handled things. How staff members looked to me automatically when something needed approval, even as I stood there in a dress that said guest, not owner. How my sister's friends thanked the servers by name, but never once asked who was responsible for the space they were celebrating in. It wasn't malicious. That almost made it worse. At one point, a woman I didn't recognize approached me near the bar. She complimented the lighting, the acoustics, the flow of the room. "You must know the owner," she said brightly. "This place is incredible." I smiled. "Yes," I said. "I do." She nodded, satisfied, and walked away. I didn't correct her. Not because I was being polite, but because I was tired of explaining myself to people who weren't listening. As the band transitioned into slower music, the energy in the room shifted. Jackets came off. Laughter grew louder. Wine glasses refilled without anyone needing to ask. Everything was working. That's what made the silence around me so loud. During the speeches, I stood near the back with my hands folded around my glass. My sister's maid of honor talked about childhood memories. Her husband's best friend joked about college disasters. Our parents spoke about love, growth, family. They talked about support. They talked about sacrifice. They didn't talk about me. Each pause felt deliberate, even if it wasn't. Each omission landed like punctuation at the end of a sentence I hadn't known was being written. I wasn't angry. I was alert. When the speeches ended, someone suggested opening gifts. My sister's face lit up instantly. She loved moments that placed her at the center of attention. Always had. She took her seat at the head table, the stack of envelopes arranged neatly beside her. People leaned forward in their chairs, smiling, ready to clap on cue. I stayed where I was. The first few gifts were exactly what you'd expect. Weekend trips. Cash. Sentimental cards read aloud with theatrical pauses. Applause followed each one like a reflex. I watched the pile slowly thin. I noticed how my sister's tone changed depending on who the gift came from, brighter for friends, warmer for colleagues, performatively grateful for relatives. My envelope didn't move. It sat there, unassuming, like it didn't want to interrupt. I hadn't chosen that placement, but I hadn't stopped it either. As the stack dwindled, the room grew restless. People shifted, whispered, checked their phones. The moment was losing momentum. Then she reached the last envelope. Mine. She picked it up between two fingers, glancing at the name. For a brief second, her expression softened, not with affection, but familiarity. Like she already knew what to expect. "Oh," she said. Not warmly, not unkindly, just final. A few people chuckled, assuming it was a joke they were missing. Someone clapped once, then stopped. My sister hesitated, turning the envelope over as if checking for something that wasn't there. No ribbon, no embellishment, no hint of performance. She slid a finger under the seal and pulled out the contents. The smile fell from her face, not dramatically, not all at once. It drained slowly, like someone lowering the volume on a song. She read the page, once, then again. The room quieted in a way I'd never heard before. Not expectant silence, not polite silence, confused silence. Her husband leaned in, brow creasing. He whispered something I couldn't hear. She didn't respond. Someone near the front laughed nervously. My sister swallowed. "This is," she began, then stopped. She looked up, scanning the room as if searching for a cue. For help, for context. Her eyes found mine. I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I didn't look away. I stood exactly as I had all night, still, present, finally visible to myself. "What is it?" someone asked. My sister cleared her throat. "It's just," she said, forcing a laugh. "It's an invoice." A ripple moved through the room. "An invoice," her husband repeated, louder now. She stared back down at the page, cheeks flushing. Numbers. Line items. Dates. I took one step forward. Not toward her. Toward the exit. "The gift," I said calmly, my voice carrying farther than I expected, was removed. She looked up sharply. Because of tone, I added. Nothing else. I set my glass on the nearest table. The clink sounded impossibly loud. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't wait for permission. As I walked out, I heard my name for the first time that night. Not spoken with gratitude, spoken with panic. But I didn't turn around. I didn't leave in a rush. That surprises people when I tell the story. They imagine slammed doors, raised voices, chaos spilling into the street. But the truth is quieter than that. I walked out the same way I'd walked through that restaurant for years, measured, careful not to bump into anyone, careful not to draw attention. Old habits die hard. Outside, the air felt different. Cooler. Lighter. Like the night was no longer pressing down on my chest. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, listening to the muffled music behind the brick walls. The party continued without me. Of course it did. I drove home with the radio off, the city lights blurring past my windshield. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry. I felt empty. Not the hollow ache of loss, but the clean kind. The kind that comes after you finally put something down you've been carrying for too long. My phone stayed quiet until after midnight. Then it lit up. One missed call. Then another. A text from my mother, "What did you do?" A message from my father, "You embarrassed your sister." I didn't respond. At 1:17 a.m., my sister texted, "Are you serious right now?" I set the phone face down on my kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of water. I drank it slowly, standing barefoot on cold tile, letting the quiet settle into my bones. By morning, the tone had shifted. Concern replaced accusation. Confusion softened into disbelief. "We need to talk. This isn't like you. Family doesn't do this to each other." That last one almost made me laugh. At 7:02 a.m., I opened my laptop. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. The wedding folder was still open, tabs frozen from the night before. Vendor confirmations. Staffing schedules. Payment summaries I'd marked, handled, without ever moving the money back into my own column. I started clicking. Florist. Deposit applied to invoice. Catering. Full service package billed to house account. Staff overtime. Absorbed. Equipment rental waived. I removed the waivers. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Methodically. By 7:45 a.m., I'd recalculated everything without the family discounts I'd quietly applied. No rounding. No forgiveness built into the margins. Just numbers. I updated the invoice. Attached the breakdown. Sent it to my sister's email. Subject line, finalized statement. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. I didn't answer. The voicemail came through anyway. "How could you do this?" My sister's voice cracked. "Do you know how this makes me look?" That question told me everything. Not "how could you feel this way?" Not "why didn't you say something sooner?" Just optics. At 9:30 a.m., my mother showed up at my door. She didn't knock. She rang the bell twice, sharp and impatient. When I opened it, she looked past me into the apartment like she expected chaos. Instead, she found quiet. "You went too far," she said immediately. That was her wedding. I nodded. And that was my restaurant. She frowned. "You could have handled it privately." "I did," I said. "For years." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes moved to the printed invoice on my counter. "You didn't have to humiliate her." I met her gaze. I didn't humiliate her. I stopped covering for her. That landed harder than I expected. My mother sighed, the familiar sound of practiced disappointment. "You've always been difficult," she said softly. "You take things personally." I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just listened. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to be understood. After she left, I blocked my sister's number. Then my father's. Then the group chat I'd muted for years, but never quite had the courage to exit. By noon, messages started coming through other channels. Cousins, aunts, people who hadn't spoken to me in months suddenly had opinions. I ignored them all. At the restaurant, my staff handled the aftermath with quiet professionalism. A few guests asked questions. Someone mentioned the invoice. Someone else mentioned how awkward it had been. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. That evening, as I locked up, I realized something that startled me. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the next request. There was no email to answer, no favor waiting in my inbox, no assumption hovering over my head, just space. And in that space, something solid finally had room to grow. By the third day, the story was no longer just ours. That's how these things go. Silence creates a vacuum, and people rush to fill it with whatever version makes them feel most comfortable. In my family's case, the version that spread fastest was the one where I was unstable, resentful, dramatic. I didn't hear it directly. I heard it through pauses, through the way conversations stopped when I walked into a room, through messages that began with "I don't want to get involved, but..." My sister, meanwhile, found her voice again. She posted photos from the wedding, smiling ones, carefully cropped. She thanked the venue. She thanked the staff. She thanked everyone who made our day possible. Still no name. Under the post, comments bloomed with sympathy. "So beautiful. Ignore the negativity. Some people just can't stand not being the center of attention." I didn't respond. At the restaurant, things shifted subtly. Vendors started asking questions, not accusing, just clarifying. One asked if the wedding had been a paid event. Another asked who had approved the custom orders. I answered honestly, "Yes, yes, yes." I didn't volunteer more than that. The truth doesn't need help if it's well documented. By midweek, someone shared a screenshot of my sister's post in a local industry group. The caption read, "Wild story if true." People began connecting dots I hadn't drawn. They noticed the tagged florists, the private band, the imported wine bottles visible in the background. They noticed that none of it looked like a small, intimate favor. A bartender who'd worked the event commented anonymously. We were told the venue owner was covering it as a gift. No payment discussed. Another chimed in. I assumed it was comped. She talked like it was. That was the moment the tone changed. Not because I spoke, but because others did. My sister's post disappeared that night. Her husband updated his profile to private. By the next morning, my parents' friends stopped tagging them in family photos. Invitations paused. Church acquaintances grew quiet. I watched it all from a distance. Not with satisfaction. With clarity. At 10:14 a.m., my sister emailed me from a new address. "We never agreed to pay for all of this," she wrote. "You're rewriting history." I forwarded the email to my attorney. At noon, my father left a voicemail from a blocked number. "You're tearing this family apart," he said. "Is this really worth it?" I deleted it without listening to the end. Because the family they were referring to, the one that thrived on my silence, had already been gone for years. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. A woman I didn't know walked into the restaurant. She introduced herself as a journalist from a regional food magazine. She said she'd heard there was an interesting story behind the wedding. "I'm not interested in publicity," I told her. She nodded. I figured. "I just wanted to ask, off the record, were you acknowledged?" I thought about the question longer than I expected to. "No," I said finally. "I wasn't." She thanked me and left. 2 days later, an article ran not about me. About boundaries. About unpaid labor in family businesses. About women who build things and are expected to give them away, quietly. My name wasn't mentioned. I smiled when I read it. That night, my sister's friend messaged me privately. "I didn't know," she wrote. "I thought you offered. I feel awful." I replied with a single sentence. "It's okay." That assumption was the problem. By the end of the week, the noise began to thin. People lost interest. Once there was no fight to watch. No emotional meltdown to consume. What remained were facts, receipts, emails, timelines, and a strange, unexpected peace. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt done. The restaurant was busy again that Friday. A normal crowd, new faces, real reservations, people who paid without assuming. As I moved through the dining room, I caught my reflection in the glass behind the bar. I looked lighter, not happier, necessarily, but unburdened. When you stop explaining yourself, you don't just reclaim your voice. You reclaim your time. By the weekend, the pressure had shifted. My phone buzzed relentlessly. Voicemails, texts, even social media DMs from family members I hadn't spoken to in years. My sister's husband called once, left a hurried message. My parents tried 3 different numbers. Each communication carried the same subtext. confrontation disguised as concern. I ignored them all. Because I finally understood something I hadn't realized until that night. The people who wanted my attention didn't want me. They wanted the version of me that existed for their convenience, the quiet, compliant, invisible sister who paid bills, made favors, and never asked for recognition. That version didn't exist anymore. Around mid-morning, a knock came at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it to find my sister standing there. Her dress was casual, but she looked like she'd rehearsed every word she was going to say. Her husband lingered behind her, arms crossed, worried eyes darting between us. I need to understand, she began, voice tight. Why the invoice? Why the everything? I let her words hang in the air. Calm, steady, unshaken. I needed you to see me, I said finally. Not the restaurant. Not the meals. Not the favors. Me. All these years, you didn't. You assumed. You expected. And when you finally got exactly what you were expecting, nothing free, nothing silent, something changed. Not me. You. She blinked. Her mouth opened, closed, words failing her. I didn't realize, she said weakly, voice trailing. No, I interrupted gently. You did. You just ignored it. That's the difference. Her husband shifted uneasily, unsure whether to speak. My parents remained behind her, cautious, as if the house itself might punish them for stepping into my quiet space. My sister tried again. Her lips trembled. I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to see me, I said softly. Not really. That's the truth. I don't need you to apologize anymore. I need you to acknowledge it, understand it, and respect it. That's all. The room fell silent. No dramatic cries. No pleading. Just the weight of recognition. After a long moment, my sister nodded slowly. Not fully accepting. Not relieved. But aware. Finally aware. She turned and left. Her husband followed. My parents lingered in the hallway, watching, not knowing if they had permission to speak. I didn't give it. And just like that, the confrontation ended. I walked back into my apartment, finally allowing myself to breathe. The printed invoice still sat on the kitchen table. I picked it up, folded it neatly, and placed it in the drawer. Not for revenge. Not for proof. For me. Because for the first time, the story didn't belong to anyone else. It belonged to me. Later that evening, I went to the restaurant. The dining room smelled faintly of flowers left behind, cleaned floors, and the memory of laughter that had been real even if I hadn't been seen. The staff smiled. They knew. They didn't need explanations. They had witnessed my quiet authority all along. I moved through the space, touching the polished wood and glancing at the neon sign I had installed years ago. It hummed softly against the wall, a reminder that I built this, I maintained it, I protected it. No one could take that from me. That night, alone, I sat with a glass of wine near the window. Outside, the city pulsed quietly indifferent. Inside, I let myself feel a strange mix of exhaustion and release. Years of invisible labor, unnoticed kindness, and subtle erasure, all acknowledged at last, if only by myself. I didn't need applause. I didn't need vindication. I didn't need them to understand or praise me. I needed only one thing, clarity. And in the quiet that stretched over the city lights, I found it. Some love stories end with heartbreak. Some end with applause. Mine ended with recognition. Quiet. Controlled. Real. I smiled, finally, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the background figure in someone else's highlight reel. I was seen, and that made all the difference.